A $50,000 Tesla was reduced to scrap metal all thanks to one furious bull. All I wanted was to restore my grandfather's ranch. But Sharon Caldwell, the HOA president, had very different ideas. She buried me in bogus fines, sabotaged my renovations, and barked, "Not up to HOA standards," until the entire neighborhood lived in silent fear. Then she made the worst mistake of her life. She targeted Titan and my grandfather's 2,000-pound bodyguard on 4 hooves. What happens when petty tyranny meets Texas grit? How can one bull take down a luxury car and a suburban dictator? Stick around. The day I began fixing up Grandpa's ranch, I felt a deep sense of purpose. This wasn't just about rebuilding an old property, it was about honoring his final wish, to preserve the rugged beauty that had shaped our land for 3 generations. The ranch stood like a relic of living history, surrounded now by rows of cookie-cutter homes. I had barely cleared the first section of the barn when the mail truck rolled up the dirt road. A crisp white envelope in my mailbox practically screamed trouble. Inside was a notice from none other than Sharon Caldwell, president of the Homeowners Association. She ordered me to halt all renovation work immediately. According to her, my plans didn't meet the aesthetic standards of the neighborhood. The letter was laced with legal threats if I dared continue. I read it 3 times, my hands trembling with disbelief and rage. 2 days later, Sharon showed up in person. I'll never forget it. She stepped out of a gleaming white SUV, dressed in a blazer that probably cost more than my entire month's income. Her blonde hair was flawless despite the sweltering Texas heat, and her fake smile looked painted on, but her eyes were icy and calculating. "Mr. Brooks," she said, her sugary tone making my skin crawl, "I thought we should talk about your situation." She eyed my land like it was a crime scene, her nose scrunching in disdain. "You see, we have certain standards here," she began, clearly rehearsed. "We have to maintain property values. A few years ago, someone else tried creating a little rustic paradise and it cost the neighborhood thousands." "Thousands," she repeated, her voice rising. She gestured vaguely at the ranch. "This little cowshed of yours? It doesn't meet HOA expectations." Over the years, the area around the ranch had changed drastically. Where there had once been open land, there were now identical white villas with manicured lawns and robotic charm. The residents walked on eggshells, terrified of Sharon's control over every aspect of their lives. At the grocery store, they whispered about her behind cupped hands. No one dared oppose her during meetings. Everyone had seen the consequences of fines, legal bullying, and eventually, people just packed up and left. The fear was thick and suffocating. My grandfather had stood firm against developers and nosy HOA reps for years, but now I was staring down their queen, Sharon Caldwell. She had turned the idea of neighborhood unity into her own personal dictatorship. Our polite conversation quickly turned sour. She pulled out her phone, flipping through photos of other homes she had corrected, each one stripped of personality and transformed into a lifeless clone of the next. "This is the standard, Mr. Brooks," she said, tapping one with her perfectly manicured finger. "Not some cowshed." I bit my tongue to keep calm. "You have 72 hours to submit full renovation plans for my approval," she continued. "Otherwise, our legal team will be involved." She turned to leave but paused dramatically at my gate. Her phony smile returned, icy and triumphant. "Oh, and Ethan, I know people, big name as judges, developers, city council. No one beats the HOA. No one." Her threat lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. That evening, I called my old friend Hank Riley, hoping he could help me understand the storm I'd walked into. Hank had lived in the area all his life and knew everyone's business. "She's not bluffing," he told me after looking over my permits. "Your paperwork's clean, but Sharon doesn't follow the rules as she writes them." We spent hours digging through the HOA rulebook. It was filled with vague, twisted language that gave her power to interpret it however she pleased. The rules weren't guidelines as if they were weapons. I felt my frustration harden into resolve. This ranch wasn't just land, it was a part of my family's legacy, my grandfather's dream, passed down with calloused hands and hard-earned pride. I wasn't about to surrender it to some HOA tyrant. Later that night, I stood inside the barn, lost in memory. I was 12 again, watching Grandpa care for Titan, his colossal, Prized bull. That bull's got more sense than half the folks in this town, Grandpa used to say, laughing as Titan licked my hand. He's a smart Tony and knows a friend from a threat. Then he told me a story. A while back, HOA agents came sniffing around, threatening citations. Titan smashed through the fence and chased them right off the land. They were so scared, they posted a warning sign at the edge of the property. Grandpa had laughed so hard he cried. Sometimes, son, he'd said, wiping his eyes, you gotta trust things to work themselves out. Titan'll know what to do when the time comes. Standing there now, I wondered if Titan remembered that day. Just before midnight, my phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. A message from an unknown number blinked on the screen. Watch your back. Sharon's got eyes everywhere. I stared at the text, uneasy. Was it a warning from a friend, or another one of Sharon's intimidation games? I walked to the window and peered out into the darkness. Sure enough, just past my property line sat a familiar white SUV. Someone was watching. Sharon's SUV sat just beyond my gate, her silhouette faint behind the tinted glass. Motionless, watching, documenting. I smiled grimly. If she wanted a fight, she'd get on ya, but I wouldn't fight stupid. I'd fight smart, just like Grandpa taught me. Starting tomorrow, I'd begin building my defense, gathering evidence, finding allies, and preparing to stand against her iron-fisted rule. This wasn't over, not even close. A sudden pounding on my front gate jolted me awake before sunrise. Through the window, I spotted two figures in HOA windbreakers, clipboards in hand and smug grins on their faces. Time for your HOA compliance check. One of them called out, not even pretending it was a routine visit. I threw on yesterday's clothes and stumbled outside, still groggy, but fully aware. This was Sharon's next move, via ambush inspections meant to catch me off guard. Sure enough, her white SUV was idling down the block. She was watching, always watching. The enforcers introduced themselves as Bradley and Mitchell, and from the moment they stepped onto my land, it was clear they were here to cause problems. Bradley headed straight for the lumber stacked by the barn. This pile's a yard hazard, he announced, snapping pictures like he was at a crime scene. That's a $500 fine. Meanwhile, Mitchell was crouched over my lawn with a ruler. 3.2 inches, he said triumphantly. Maximum allowed is 3. That's another fine. For the next 2 hours, they combed through every inch of my property. Paint color, too bold. Fence alignment, inconsistent. Mailbox, excessively rustic. By the time they were done, they'd racked up more than $2,000 in violations. But the final blow came when Bradley handed me a notice. President Caldwell wants you to know these inspections will now be weekly until your property is fully compliant, he said with thinly veiled delight. She's very concerned about preserving the integrity of our community. Integrity. That word nearly made me laugh out loud. This wasn't about community standards. This was harassment. Sharon was trying to bury me in fines until I either gave up the ranch or went broke fighting her. I wasn't about to do either. As soon as they left, I called Hank. Within the hour, he showed up with something that made me grin. A professionally made sign that technically followed HOA rules while hilariously mocking them. We planted it at the edge of the property, where everyone passing by could see it. It read, "Perfect HOA yard, a step-by-step guide." A grass height, exactly 3.0 inches, measured hourly. A wood pile, arranged in HOA-approved aesthetic formation. A warning, this property contains 1.2% too much character. Within minutes, cars slowed down to read it. People snapped pictures. By lunchtime, someone had posted a photo online with the hashtag #HOAcananigans, and it exploded at 10,000 views in just a few hours. The comments poured in, people across the country venting about their own HOA nightmares. Then Tessa Monroe, my neighbor and a loan officer at the local bank, stopped by on her lunch break. She was laughing so hard she could barely speak. "This is brilliant," she said between gasps. "You have no idea how many people have been waiting for someone to stand up to Sharon." Her laughter faded, and she leaned closer. "Can I tell you something?" she whispered. "Last year, Sharon fined me $800 because my roses were too red. Said they needed to be subtle coral to meet community standards." I stared, stunned. "There are more of us than you think," she said quietly. People who've been keeping records. We're just a broken bar scared to go up against her alone. She promised to connect me with others, then hurried back to work. But the day wasn't done with surprises. Titan, my massive longhorn bull, decided to join the action. Somehow, he got loose from the back pasture and trotted straight toward the crowd gathered near the sign. The sight of 2,000 pounds of muscle and horn sent people scrambling with a mix of screams and nervous laughter. Titan just stood there, pawing at the ground like he was enjoying the attention. I coaxed him back without incidental, but the chaos was unforgettable. That evening, I reviewed the footage from the new security camera I'd installed after Sharon's first threat. What I saw made my stomach turn. At the crack of dawn, just before the inspection, someone had approached the gate in dark clothing. The footage turned blurry for 10 minutes as if the camera had been tampered with. But as the figure left, a street light caught a flash of patterned fabric, a scarf, the exact designer scarf Sharon had worn during her last visit. She'd been here, tampering with my security system. Before unleashing her inspection team, I saved the footage to multiple drives. This wasn't just dirty tactics anymore. Sharon was crossing legal lines. As night fell, I spotted movement again. Her SUV, parked just outside my gate, headlights off. She was back watching, waiting. My phone buzzed with another anonymous text. "She's not done. Be ready. Someone's tailing you. Be careful." The anonymous message lit up my phone just as I turned back toward the SUV parked down the road. I gave a cheerful, exaggerated wave. She panicked, gunned the engine, and sped off in a cloud of dust. But I knew she'd be back. This was far from over. As I stepped inside, a weight settled in my chest. Sharon was escalating. Her games were over. She was playing war now, and something told me her next move would be even worse. I paused by Titan's barn and noticed something odd. A panel in the far wall, slightly ajar. It looked like it was hiding something. Grandpa always did have a few secrets buried around this ranch. I made a mental note to investigate later. "Tailing me now, Sharon?" I muttered to the empty yard. "Game on. Drop a comment if you think you know what Sharon's planning next, because tomorrow's going to be even more interesting." I almost gave up everything when I saw what she sent next. 3 days after my viral sign stunt, a certified letter arrived, delivered by a mail carrier who gave me a sympathetic look, like he already knew the storm brewing inside that envelope. My hands shook as I tore it open. Notice of intent to pursue legal action. The bold letters screamed at me. Sharon was suing me for defamation of character and damage to the HOA's reputation. She demanded $2,000 in damages, the immediate removal of the sign, and a public written apology. But the worst part? She was threatening criminal charges over Titano, claiming his brief trot through the front yard was reckless endangerment. It was absurd, but dangerous. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. This was a full-on attempt to destroy me. That afternoon, my phone started blowing up with messages from neighbors. Check the neighborhood Facebook page. Clearly Sharon had posted a video titled, "The Truth About Ethan Brooks, a Danger to Our Community." It looked professionally edited. Clips of me violating rules, leaving a rake out for 5 minutes, parking my truck an inch over my driveway line. Footage of Titan, cut to make him look like a wild beast instead of the mellow grazer he really was. The narrator's voice was distorted, but I knew the cadence. I knew the wording. Sharon's fingerprints were all over it. Her smear campaign had officially launched. Within 48 hours, the attacks escalated. More videos, more lies. A high-powered camera had been capturing my every move. He zoomed in from someone's second-story window. Anonymous posts claimed I was converting the ranch into a commercial rodeo, that my construction caused foundation cracks in neighboring homes, that Titan had once attacked a child. All lies, but believable enough to sway people who didn't know me. Some neighbors stayed friendly, most didn't. I felt the shift at the grocery store. Cold stares, hushed whispers, parents pulling their kids closer as I passed. By Thursday, Sharon had called an emergency home meeting. The community center was packed, a standing room only. But the warmth that once greeted me there was gone. Conversations halted as I walked in. Heads turned, eyes avoided mine. At the front, Sharon sat with her inner circle, dressed in matching blazers, like a suburban cartel. Her smile was thin and calculated. "We're here to discuss serious safety and property concerns raised by Brooks Ranch," she began, her voice syrupy with fake concern. "As you've all seen in the documented evidence, we have a situation threatening the very fabric of our community standards." She clicked through a PowerPoint presentation that distorted every fact, twisted every image. She fabricated violations from thin air. I sat there, absorbing each hit, the pressure mounting with every lie. When it was time for resident comments, I stood ready to speak, but Sharon shut me down. "Mr. Brooks, you'll have your opportunity at the formal violations hearing. Tonight is for concerned residents only," she smirked. This wasn't a discussion, it was a public execution. For the next hour, I had to sit in silence as person after person stepped forward to voice concerns. Most read from clearly pre-written statements as statements Sharon probably handed out herself. Then, unexpectedly, Tessa Monroe stood up. Instead of piling on, she held up a folder. "I'd like to address some concerns about HOA transparency," she said clearly. Sharon's face went pale. "I've reviewed copies of meeting notes, some unofficial, some not properly logged. There's a pattern. Sharon has been modifying HOA rules without resident vote just days before targeting specific homeowners." Tessa flipped pages, each one a nail in Sharon's coffin. She changed the inspection guidelines 2 weeks before Ethan's first fine, specifically to target agricultural structures that had been grandfathered in for over 40 years. The room erupted. Sharon pounded her gavel, yelling for order, but the crowd was turning. Then Harold Vance stood, his voice slow but deliberate. "Why are we suddenly attacking a ranch that's been here longer than most of our homes?" And that's when Sharon snapped. "You'll regret messing with me," she snarled at me, loud enough for the whole room to hear. Phones came out, cameras recorded, her mask had slipped. Chaos. People shouting. Sharon tried to adjourn the meeting and stormed out as residents spilled into the parking lot, buzzing with anger and revelation. I had won a battle but not the war. Outside, the mood had shifted. It felt like a resistance was forming. Tessa handed me a flash drive and leaned in. "It's audio recordings of closed-door meetings. Sharon discussing which residents to target. She's been running this whole like a mob boss. You're just her latest hit." I stared at the tiny drive in my hand, my fingers curled around it like a lifeline. Then Harold stepped up beside me. "I should have spoken out sooner," he said, regret thick in his voice. "Fear makes cowards of us all." He glanced around at the gathering crowd. "But maybe broken bar, maybe it's time that changed." Just as a flicker of hope began to return, my phone buzzed with an alert from the security system. Someone was on the property. I opened the live feed and all of us gasped. A shadowy figure in dark clothing was at Titan's pen, working at the gate latch. "That's Sharon's car in the background," Tessa said, her voice sharp with alarm. I was already sprinting for my truck. "Call the police," I yelled. "She's going after my bull." The drive home blurred in a storm of adrenaline and dread. I pushed the truck harder than I ever had, 1,000 awful possibilities racing through my mind. If Sharon hurt Titania, she wouldn't just be targeting me, she'd be destroying the last living piece of my grandfather's legacy. I skidded into the driveway and bolted for the back pasture, heart pounding. The gate to the pen was ajar, but thankfully, Titan was still in Sadia, shaken, stomping, snorting but unharmed. He pawed at the ground, clearly upset. Near the gate, I spotted something, a leather glove, expensive, monogrammed, SC. Sharon had been here. She'd tried to release Titan, probably hoping he'd cause chaos she could blame on me. Something must have spooked her before she could finish. I carefully bagged the glove as evidence and spent the next hour calming Titan. He nudged my hand gently, like he was telling me he was okay. "She's after you now, boy," I murmured, anger simmering in my chest. "But I swear I won't let her hurt you." Then came the next strike. At 5 a.m., I was jolted awake by the unmistakable sound of rushing water. I dashed outside in nothing but boxers and boots, only to find my front yard had turned into a lake. Water erupted from multiple pipes like geysers, flooding everything in sight. My entire yard was a swamp, thousands of gallons soaking the ground, destroying weeks of work. I fumbled through the mud, searching for the shut-off valve. This wasn't an accident. Sharon had gone from threats to outright sabotage. When the emergency plumber arrived and assessed the damage under the pale morning light, His verdict was immediate. "This was deliberate," he said. "Cracked in several places. You're looking at least $5,000 to fix it right." The number hit like a sledgehammer. Between the repairs, Sharon's bogus HOA fines, and looming legal fees, she was bankrupting me piece by piece. And then on Kia her white SUV rolled past, slow and deliberate. She gave me a smug smile through the window. Within the hour, HOA enforcers showed up, citing me for creating a community hazard. Another fine, another blow. They blamed me for the sabotage she caused. That evening, I collapsed inside Titan's barn, back against the wall, broken. The weight of everything, a financial ruin, humiliation, exhaustion settled heavy on my chest. I couldn't stop the spiral of defeat. Titan nudged me again and again with his massive head, trying to lift my spirit, but even his quiet loyalty couldn't pierce the darkness. "I failed you, Grandpa," I whispered to the barn walls. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I pulled out my phone and stared at an old photo of Grandpa standing right here, proud, solid, the rock of our family. I could almost hear his voice. "Sometimes the fight looks lost, son, but right needs a cool head." Cool head wins more than hot blood ever could. That's when Titan slammed his horns into the wall with thunderous force. The barn shuddered. His eyes met mine, burning with purpose, as if demanding I stop feeling sorry for myself and do something. And suddenly I remembered, the camera. Hank and I had installed one in the barn just yesterday. My hands trembled as I pulled up the footage. What I saw made my jaw drop. There was Sharon, 3 a.m., clear as day. She was on her phone and the mic had captured her voice. "I'll bankrupt that kid if I have to," she said coldly. "My investor friend wants that ranch cheap. I promised delivery by end of summer." My hands shook. Then came the worst part. "Once he's ruined, we offer him a tenth of what it's worth. He won't have a choice." I nearly dropped the phone. And then something else. As Sharon turned to leave, something fell from her pocket. I rewound, zoomed in a paper, a folded document. Grabbing a flashlight, I ran to the barn and scoured the spot she'd stood. There, caught against a feed bag, was the note. Slightly damp, but intact. I unfolded it and my breath caught. In Sharon's unmistakable handwriting. "Buy ranch cheap once he's broke. Demo everything. Build 15 units minimum." Below were profit projections of millions in gains. This wasn't about HOA policy. This was real estate fraud, a deliberate destruction for private gain. I moved fast, photographed every angle of the note, saved the video to multiple cloud drives, copied it to USBs. Then I saw one last detail in the footage. After dropping the note, Sharon had walked around the barn, pointing, gesturing, even kicking beams. She wasn't just fantasizing about development. She was inspecting my family's land, already planning the demolition of our legacy. Rage boiled inside me, but this time, I had the truth. I had evidence. Sharon had gone too far, and now, I had the proof to bring her down. Just as I secured everything, my phone buzzed again. Another alert. Motion near Titan's pen. I switched to the live camera feed and froze. Sharon's silhouette was unmistakable, creeping toward Titan's gate, bolt cutters in hand, the same kind that had destroyed my water lines. My pulse surged. I bolted toward the back pasture, but by the time I arrived, she was gone. The gate hung slightly open, the lock damaged but still intact. On the ground lay a black leather glove, inexpensive, monogrammed SC. Sharon Caldwell had been here. She'd tried to release Titan, likely hoping he'd cause chaos, giving her the pretext to have him euthanized and get me arrested. I secured the gate with a heavy chain and padlock, my thoughts spinning. This wasn't just about harassment. Sharon was waging all-out war, trying to bankrupt me, destroy what mattered most, and now risk the lives of neighbors for leverage. The glove, the sabotage, the investor's note, all of it painted a clear picture. She was orchestrating a calculated land grab, and now she'd gotten reckless. That would be her downfall. Between the security footage, her audio confession, and the damning note, I had everything I needed to stop her. "She's after you now, boy," I said, resting my hand on Titan's flank. He looked at me, steady and calm. "Not on my watch. This ends now." As morning sunlight stretched across my battered yard, I stared down at Sharon's glove. "You messed with the wrong bull," I muttered. Big mistake. But rage alone wouldn't win this fight. I needed strategy. That's when the idea struck us: set a trap. Use her ambition against her. I spent the morning preparing hidden cameras, off-site backups, and most importantly, crafting the perfect bait. If Sharon wanted to see me broken, I'd give her a convincing performance. I called her office, voice feigning exhaustion. "Sharon, a broken bar. I think we need to talk. The repair's a broken bar. The finesse a broken bar. I can't keep fighting. Maybe there's a deal we can work out." There was a pause. Then her voice oozed false sympathy. "Oh Ethan, I'm so glad you've come to your senses. I'll stop by this afternoon. Let's make this easier for both of us." It made my skin crawl, but I stayed in character. 3 o'clock works. As soon as she hung up, I called Hank and Tessa. We had 4 hours to execute the perfect sting. Hank arrived with enough surveillance gear to outfit aspiring. "We're going to nail her," he said, helping wire cameras inside and out. Tessa got to work rallying community members. 20 people are ready to attend an emergency home meeting tonight, she reported. They've had enough of Sharon's dictatorship. We staged the Uzi boxes by the door, furniture covered, the look of defeat everywhere. I secured Titan in his reinforced pen, and no mistakes this time. At 3 o'clock sharp, Sharon arrived in her power suit, practically glowing with smug satisfaction. She strolled across my land like she already owned it. "What a shame it's come to this," she said, mock sadness in her voice. "But HOA standards are clear. Your little ranch just doesn't fit." I nodded, looking beaten. The flooding was the final straw. "I can't afford to stay." Her smile widened. "Old infrastructure can be so fragile. Who knows what might break next?" Caught on camera. She got bolder as we walked. "At Titan's pen," she scowled. "That animal will have to go immediately. Can't have dangerous livestock near families." I played my next card. "Well, some neighbors have grown fond of Titan." Tessa Monroe even started a petition to declare him a historical landmark. Her expression soured. "Tessa Monroe needs to watch herself, or she'll be in violation of HOA rules." 2. Another threat. Caught on tape. Inside, she presented her solution, a contract offering pennies on the dollar for my land. "Sign this," she said, "and your HOA fines vanish. The lawsuit disappears. You can walk away clean." I pretended to consider it. "Was this always the plan?" I asked. "Force me out to take the land?" Her mask slipped completely. "Oh Ethan, of course it was. Do you really think I care about lawn height or shed colors? This land is worth millions. Developers are lining up. You should see the plants: luxury condos, retail, even a country club. And I get 20% as a finder's fee." She laughed, drunk on her own power. "I've forced out 6 families already using the same playbook. You're just number 7. Her confident, arrogant, damning, and caught on every camera. Sharon Caldwell had just buried herself. Sharon leaned back, absolutely confident, as if she'd already won. "A little sabotage here, some legal pressure theory, and eventually, everyone folds," she said smugly. She chuckled. "The water pipes. Child's play. Wanna hear something funny? I've got a guy in the city permit office who'll swear your renovations were unpermitted. Doesn't matter if they were legit, paperwork says otherwise. Who's going to believe you over official records?" That was Hank's cue. Right on time, he texted me, "Meeting's ready. Go." I smiled at Sharon. "You know, you're right. I am naive. Naive enough to think the HOA president would actually follow the law." Her expression shifted from smugness to confusion and then horror as I pulled out my phone and hit play. Her voice echoed in the room, clear as day. Every word she had just sabotage, bribes, false records, land grab, playing back in her own voice. "You recorded me?" she shrieked, leaping from her chair. "That's illegal." I shook my head calmly. "Texas is a one-party consent state, Sharon. Only one person has to know about the recording." And I did. But the real punch came next. "Oh, and so do the 43 neighbors currently watching this live stream," I said, turning my phone so she could see the viewers climbing, including 5 HOA board members, all very interested in your little schmea broken bar, especially that 20% finder's fee you've been pocketing is the one that should have gone to the HOA. Her phone lit up like a Christmas tree of calls, texts, alerts all at once. The panic in her eyes was unmistakable. She lunged for my phone, but I backed away, still streaming. Did you really think you could erase my family's legacy for a quick payout? I said. My grandfather built this ranch from nothing. Survived droughts, floods and developers a hell of a lot smarter than you. He taught me one thing. When someone comes for what's yours, you don't just fight back, you make damn sure they never try it again. Through the window, I saw neighbors arriving for the emergency home meeting. Sharon noticed them too and bolted for the door, but there stood Tessa, blocking her path, phone in hand. Actually, Sharon, it is over, she said coolly. I just played the border recording from last year. Oh, you remember, when you said, "Hey, that bull's trouble, maybe a little accident would solve the problem." Tessa narrowed her eyes. They're voting to remove you as HOA president right now. The meeting kicked off right there in my front yard. Neighbors, so furious and wide awake, demanded Sharon's resignation. As she tried to push through the crowd, she ran headfirst into Hank. "Going somewhere?" he asked, deadpan. Sharon had tried to bribe him weeks ago to spy on me. He'd told me immediately, and we used that offer as part of the trap. But just as things were winding down, I noticed something terrifying. The Titan's gate was open. "Where's Titan?" someone shouted. On the ground, Sharon's second glove. She'd done it. While we were distracted, she'd snuck back and released Titan. I took off sprinting toward the barn. She let out the bull. I shouted behind me, "Somebody call the police. And whatever you do, don't run. Titan only chases when provoked." Drop a comment if you're ready for the showdown between Sharon and the very angry bull. The sun was barely up as I reached the barn, heart pounding. Titan's massive pen stood wide open, his hoof prints trailing into the mist. This was bad. Sharon had let him out as one last act of revenge, hoping he'd charge through the neighborhood, destroy property, maybe even hurt someone, enough to make her the victim again and finish me off for good. But what she didn't understand was that Titan wasn't just some wild animal. My grandfather had trained him to defend the ranch, and after weeks of Sharon lurking around, Titan had definitely formed an opinion. I pulled up the camera footage on my phone as I followed his trail, and what I saw was jaw-dropping. At 4:30 a.m., Sharon had come back dressed head to toe in black, bolt cutters in hand. She sliced through the chain on Titan's gate and swung it open. Then she tried to spook him, throwing rocks, hitting the barn wall with a stick, yelling. Titan didn't move. He just stood there, watching her with calm, intelligent eyes, unbothered, unimpressed. But when Sharon gave up and walked back toward her carrot, Titan followed, slowly, silently, step by step, like a shadow stalking her. She didn't even notice until it was too late. The tracks led straight to my driveway, where I found a scene I'll never forget. There sat Sharon's pristine white Tesla, illegally parked on my property, or a broken bar, what was left of it. The driver's side looked like it had gone through a demolition derby. The hood was crushed, the bumpers were scattered like debris from a plane crash. It was a total wreck. And there was Titan, standing next to the destruction, calmly chewing cud like it was just another morning workout. Inside the car, Sharon was unharmed but completely unhinged, screaming at the top of her lungs, hurling threats, sobbing hysterically. Her hair was wild, her makeup smeared, her expensive power suit coated in dust from the airbag. It was poetic justice. Neighbors had started to gather in bathrobes and pajamas. One of Tessa's teenage Soda was filming everything like it was a reality show. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Karma Live," he narrated. Sharon Caldwell, former HOA dictator, just got bullied by Titan himself. Texas justice. His live stream took off like wildfire. Thousands of viewers tuned in within minutes. The video captured everything: a Sharon breaking in, trying to unleash Titan, and the bull's slow, deliberate destruction of her luxury car. "Dude, 10,000 views already," the kid shouted. "Titan's going viral." People in the comments were calling Titan a hero, saying he deserved a medal for standing up to HOA tyranny. And honestly, they weren't wrong. Let me know when you're ready for the final showdown wrap-up, or if you want bonus content like Titan fan comments, HOA board fallout, or a news article recap. The crowd kept growing as word spread like wildfire. Neighbors who had lived in fear of Sharon for years were now openly laughing at her downfall. "That's what you get for messing with Ethan's ranch," someone shouted. Even Harold Vance, who had been silent for so long, stepped forward holding his phone. "I'm sending this to my cousin at the news station," he said. People need to see what happens when HOA power goes unchecked. Tessa was practically dancing. Titan's the real HOA boss now, she declared with glee. The crowd erupted in a chant. Titan for president, Titan for president. Inside the mangled Tesla, Sharon's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. She kept screaming her favorite phrasing, not up to HOA standards. Like it was some kind of spell that might fix everything, but it only made her sound more unhinged. When the police arrived, they didn't find a rampaging bull or a terrified victim. Instead, they saw a calm Titan standing beside me like a loyal guardiana and a hysterical criminal trapped in her own wrecked car. The officers reviewed the barn's security footage, watching Sharon break in, attempt to release Titan, and incite chaos. Their faces barely hid their amusement. One officer called out, "Ma'am, please step out of the vehicle." When Sharon shrieked that the doors were jammed, the fire department was summoned. It took 20 minutes and the jaws of life to extract her from the crushed luxury car. She finally emerged covered in airbag dust, makeup smeared, hair wild. She pointed a trembling finger at me and shrieked one last time, "Not up to HOA standards." The officer simply shook his head and read her rights. What followed was a full-blown unraveling of Sharon Caldwell's empire. A search of her home uncovered detailed files on every resident she'd driven out, complete with her chosen methods of harassment. There were bank records showing she'd embezzled over $200,000 from HOA funds, spending it on personal luxuries while claiming it went toward neighborhood improvements. There were contracts linking her to premier development partners, a proof that she stood to make millions by forcing out original homeowners and selling their land. Investigators even found the bolt cutters with pipe residue still on them, along with receipts for surveillance equipment she'd used to spy on residents. And when it was revealed that she'd been bribing city officials to look the other way, the FBI stepped in. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the hills, I stood in Titan's barn, the chaos finally settling. Titan nudged my hand, calm and gentle again, the aggression gone. He had done what he was trained to do: protect this land. "You did good, boy," I murmured, scratching his ears. "Grandpa would be proud." As the wind rustled through the trees and carried a faint echo of my grandfather's laughter, I looked down at the driveway, still littered with tire tracks and scraps of white Tesla, and smiled. Sharon thought she'd unleashed chaos. Instead, she'd unleashed justice. The video of Titan vs. Tesla hit over 3 million views. News outlets from around the globe picked up the story. Comments flooded in, hailing Titan a hero. One petition even launched to grant him an honorary sheriff's badge. "Not up to HOA standards" became an internet meme, used everywhere to mock authoritarian nonsense. Drop a comment if you think Titan deserves his own statuette, because this bull just became a legend. The next morning, I stood at the edge of my freshly restored ranch. Titan grazed peacefully in the back pasture, his massive frame silhouetted by the Texas sunrise. The flood damage had been fixed, the barn wore a new coat of paint, and for the first time in years, the land felt whole again. "We're almost there, buddy," I called. Titan lifted his head, snorted once in acknowledgement, and returned to grazing. It had been 3 weeks since Sharon's arrest. The neighborhood had transformed, fear replaced with laughter, resentment with community. But the most profound change came with the discovery that proved my grandfather had always been playing the long game. The criminal case against Sharon had snowballed. In court, Tessa presented spreadsheets of evidence that Sharon had been falsifying HOA records for years. Forensic accountants uncovered layers of fraud, fake vendor accounts, forged invoices, and more than $200,000 funneled directly into Sharon's pockets. She billed us for landscaping that never happened, repairs that were never done, Tessa explained to the courtroom. And she used our money for vacations, shopping sprees, even payments on the Tesla that Titan turned into scrap metal. The judge's face grew darker with every revelation, especially when it was shown Sharon had deliberately targeted elderly residents and single parents, people she assumed couldn't fight back. The verdict was swift: guilty on all counts of embezzlement, fraud, vandalism, conspiracy. She faced serious prison time and was ordered to pay full restitution. But the most satisfying moment came at a special neighborhood meeting, where Sharon, now a convicted felon, was forced to stand before the very people she tormented and apologize. Her voice cracked as she admitted her crime: harassment, theft, betrayal. When she finished, no one clapped. They simply stared. As the bailiff led her away, she muttered one last, broken, not up to HOA standards. Only this time, it sounded like a whimper, not a threat. Sharon Caldwell had fallen completely, and the real rebuilding of homes, trust, and community could finally begin. Harold Vance's first act as HOA president was to undo all of Sharon's arbitrary rule changes. The HOA guidelines were restored to their original mission, helping neighbors, not harassing them. The fines against me were dismissed, and Harold offered a heartfelt public apology that actually brought tears to my eyes. Ethan Brooks stood up when the rest of us stayed silent. Harold said his grandfather would be proud, and frankly, we should be ashamed it took us so long to support him. The crowd erupted in applause. In that moment, a weight I'd been carrying for months finally lifted from my shoulders. With Sharon gone, the ranch renovations were completed without a single obstacle, and I decided to celebrate. We threw a massive neighborhood barbecue. Everyone showed up. Neighbors brought homemade dishes and cold drinks. Kids played freely, and those who had once feared Titan now lined up to pet him under close supervision. Of course, the bull stood calmly as tiny hands tapped and patted his flanks, clearly enjoying the attention. Tessa arrived with the highlight of the evening, a cake shaped like a Tesla, with a small bull figurine stomping on top. To Titania, the hero we didn't know we needed, she declared, raising her drink in a toast. The laughter that followed was the kind that healed old wounds. The party stretched into the night, filled with laughter, stories, and something we hadn't felt in a long time, real community. As the embers of the bonfire glowed low, I remembered something at the odd panel in Titan's barn I'd noticed weeks earlier but never opened. With a few curious neighbors still hanging around, I grabbed a crowbar and pried it loose. Inside was a weathered metal box. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter from my grandfather, dated just a month before he died, alongside official documents I'd never seen before. The letter read, "Ethan, if you're reading this, someone tried to force you off our land. I knew this day would come. Check the county records. Our ranch holds oil and gas rights worth millions. Developers have been circling us for decades. But that's not why we keep this land. We keep it because it's home, because it matters, because sometimes standing your ground means more than money. Titan knows that. He's trained to protect what's ours. If he damaged something expensive, it means he recognized a threat. And son, that means you already won. Trust him, trust yourself, and remember, you don't fight to win, you fight to protect what matters." The accompanying documents confirmed it. Our ranch sat atop valuable mineral deposits, of the very thing Sharon and her developer allies had been after. They were willing to destroy lives for profit, but they had underestimated one thing: the strength of a community united and the sheer will of one very determined bull. I read the letter aloud to the neighbors still present. Harold shook his head in awe. "Your grandfather was 3 steps ahead," he said. "He knew this fight was coming and he made sure you were ready." Tessa laughed, pointing at Titan. "He even trained the perfect security system." That bull knew Sharon was bad news from day one. We all turned to Titan. He stood near the barn, tail flicking, basking in the admiration like he understood every word. His Tesla-smashing legend had now spread far beyond our quiet town. He was a local icon, a living meme, a 4-hooved symbol of resistance. The story took one final, hilarious twist the following week, when I received a letter from a small town in Montana. Their HOA president had apparently gone full dictator, and word of Titan's heroics had reached them. "We don't have a bull," the letter read, "but we do have a buffalo named Duke who's getting pretty tired of our president measuring everyone's grass with a ruler. Any advice?" I laughed so hard I nearly fell off the porch. I wrote back with a detailed guide: how to document abuse, build community support, and stay calm in the face of tyranny. I also included a photo of Titan standing next to what remained of Sharon's Tesla, captioned, "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." As I sealed the envelope, the sky turned golden with the setting sun. I stepped outside, where Titan lumbered over to me and gently nudged my hand just like he used to do with Grandpa. "We did it, boy," I whispered, stroking his thick neck. "We saved our home, helped our neighbors, and proved that bullies don't always win. Titan snorted, pawed at the dirt, and then turned to graze in the evening light, looking out over the ranch. Safe now. HOA again. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. Sharon was behind bars, the HOA was reformed, the community had learned to stand together, and Titan had become a symbol not just of justice, but of what can happen when everyday people stand up to corruption. His video continued to inspire others, and the hashtag #TitanJustice showed no signs of slowing down. I grinned and muttered to the wind, "Not up to HOA standards." Funny how those words had once been a weapon, but now, they were a rallying cry. In the end, it wasn't just the land we saved, we reclaimed our voice, our home, and our freedom, because every neighborhood needs a Titan. And sometimes, the best way to fight corruption, a broken bar, is with 2,000 pounds of Texas attitude. So when someone tries to bulldoze your dreams, just remember, sometimes you need the right bull to doze them back.